shit. I know I laced it with blood.
You lied to me. Now I cry. That was probably a lot for all of you to hear, and you were probably thinking, I thought I was putting on a podcast. Why am I hearing a beautiful and accurate rendition of the seminal Mark Morrison classic, Return of the Vaxx? Well, the simple answer to that question is because I like puns. That's right, I got some news. I'm half inoculated, fully discombobulated, and doing my part to fight the Chinese propaganda machine that keeps on churning. I did it. I got my shot. I finally got my shot. I took a break from attending the rigors of medical night school, which I am taking recently over the last year or so. And it's a pretty big class, the nighttime medical school. It's full of people who have all this expert medical advice despite their actual profession having nothing to do whatsoever with the field of medicine. They're people who have a lot of baccalaureate research and like YouTube videos. People who just seem to know, despite not having a lab coat or a stethoscope, or knowing what a stethoscope is, quite frankly, those types of people that just knew the vaccine was no good, I've been taking night school with them. But I recently realized that I'm being motherfucking stupid, which is not something that I'm sure would surprise anybody. That tends to be one of my motifs. But I haven't gotten the vaccine or fully. I finally did this past weekend. But the reason I was so hesitant to get the vaccine, and this is going to make me sound awful, other than just kind of not liking needles, I just wasn't, I was busy. You know, I've been busy, man. I've been doing shit. And I know that's not a good enough reason to, you know, stop the spread potentially of a disease that could kill 15% of the people on Earth. I know that's not the most heroic reason, or even, you know, I'm not in line with the greatest conscientious objectors in history. I'm not Hacksaw Ridge. I'm not someone who has a moral opposition to it. I'm someone who didn't like something sharp touching their body, and just generally not liking standing in line, specifically in drugstores. But I did it. I finally got over myself because I was peer pressured by, nice try. But yeah, no, I finally got over myself. I went into Walgreens. Actually, it was a Rite Aid for the sake of the story and the truth. So I go in the Rite Aid. Finally have a clear mind. It was like I just left the Church of Scientology. I was going clear. I'm ready to get inoculated. I'm ready to do my part to put an end to Mal's bullshit. So I walk in, go to the back of the pharmacy, and I say, "Excuse me." I say, "Excuse me, sir." I say, "Excuse me, barkeep. Please attend to this patron." He walks up to the front. I tell the young man, "I'd like to get a vaccine, sir. One vaccine. One of your finest vaccines. Whatever the vaccine is." And I'm someone who doesn't even really get flu shots because I ain't scared of no flu. So I have very little experience with requesting needles. And then the nice guy who's probably $300,000 in debt, did 7 years of pharmaceutical school, I guess works too because it's a shit-ass job. It's a shit way to have a job despite all the rigors of medical school, and yet you still work in a fucking Rite Aid. So this guy's kind of thrown off by my charmingly abrasive tone. And then he asks me, "Well, what brand?" And I was thrown off. I was not expecting a brand option. I was not expecting to make a decision. I was not expecting to have to choose between, you know, Coke Zero or Coke. I didn't think this was something that had a level of choice attached to it, even though, you know, maybe that's a different argument. But I didn't think it was just like ordering a goddamn drink. I didn't think I just picked which team I liked the most, which jersey matched the team that I identified with. And it turns out that I'm deeply rooted for Moderna. And the reason I said Moderna was because, honestly, it was the only brand name that I could think of in that moment and did not want to sound stupid. And I knew I probably should have done my research. I probably should have showed up and said, "Sir, what's the alcohol content percentage of the Johnson & Johnson versus, you know, the Pfizer AstraZeneca?" And those might be two different things. AstraZeneca might be a spell. It might be a BDSM safe word for warlocks and other associated magi. I don't know. I don't know these things. So he takes me behind the counter. I feel like a big boy. He rolls up my arm, dabs me up, shoots me full of coronavirus vaccine, or half of it. He shoots me half full of coronavirus vaccine. And I was a little worried at first because, like I just said, I didn't come in with research. I didn't do my own gain of function analysis before I showed up to the Rite Aid and requested that I get, my civic duty shot into my arm so I could fight the enemy. And that's what I think this is. Make no mistake, just because I finally grew up and stopped being a little pussy scared of needles, even though I was masquerading as someone who had some serious medical, skepticisms, I finally realized, bruh, just shoot yourself up. God bless America. Uncle Sam wants you inoculated, and he doesn't want you asking a lot of questions. And I'm someone who loves asking questions. I'm someone who loves asking questions so much, I'll ask them even if I know I'm not going to get an answer, even if I know I'm not even asking them at anybody other than myself. But I'll answer them. But it was a weird line that all of a sudden got drawn with this vaccine thing because, on one hand, the idea of the government forcing you to put something in your body, like past your goddamn epidermis, into your MF and core, biologically speaking, anytime the government's going to force you to do something like that, that seems inherently creepy. That seems a little bit weird. That seems like something Bill Gates is probably attached to. Or if not Bill, his homie George. But at the same time, vaccines work. And that's something I had to remind myself because I quickly realized how much I used to think people who were against vaccines were just stupid, dumb idiots we could afford to lose. They were essentially carnival goldfish of people. They were things that you could look at and say, oh, that's cool, and then 3 hours later it was dead or useless. Somehow, over the last 18 months of this lockdown, alien-infested, time-warp black hole thing that just happened, somehow along the lines, I didn't even realize I kind of became someone who was against vaccines for a minute. And it's weird to say out loud. It kind of feels like I'm in a confessional, but I had to let it hang. I had to be honest with myself. I had to give myself a moment's worth of distance and look, hey, dude, you're not someone who's against vaccines. Do you know anybody with shingles? No. Do you know anybody with polio besides FDR? Hell no. Is there a Lou Gehrig's vaccine? I gotta stop asking myself questions rhetorically. I should just settle on one, answer it, and move on. So that's what I did. I got shot up. And I still think coronavirus is probably a biological weapon or something that was accidentally being researched in a ballpark adjacent to biological weapons research, most likely because of China. I think these things because they're all true. But that doesn't mean the vaccine's not true. And even if you're going to assume coronavirus or in any way, shape, or form the narrative attached to it from CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all those traditional outlets, if you're going to think even 1% of that is maybe a little fishy or not exactly what the fuck happened, that doesn't disqualify the need for getting a vaccine. If your enemy fucked up in a lab and accidentally, while they're making biological weapons dinner, got the squash and the peas crisscrossed and all of a sudden your pilaf's fucked, that doesn't mean the pilaf is no longer in the kitchen. It doesn't mean it shouldn't be thrown out or put down a garbage disposal or, researched and had a vaccine developed and distributed to everybody so no one goes dead because of the whoopsie from mainland. So I did my part. And doing your part sometimes requires swallowing your pride, which is probably not really something that applies here, but it felt kind of apt for what we were talking about. So for some better news, there's been tornadoes where I live. And where I live is not somewhere I had to, or at least thought I had to be concerned about tornado occurrences. And I'm not an old person, at least in this current incarnation of me. I'm a young man. I'm 25 years old. If I was born in any other period of time, let's say 100 years ago, I'd be getting back from a war with a family. 100 years earlier than that, I probably would have just started a religion. 100 years earlier than that, probably Declaration of Independence. That's the type of thought-provoking shit I try to do. But apart from me, I'm a young dude. So I really shouldn't have a huge frame of reference when I think back and try to remember what, 20 years ago was like, at least in terms of weather, like the most mundane quality of a time period. But at least when tornadoes were first explained to me, when I was in elementary school with the clouds and the cumulus and the nimbus and the, evaporation cycle, whatever the fuck all those people were talking about, all those nerds, all those inside jobbers. So when tornadoes were first explained to me, as someone who lives in Pennsylvania, they said, hey, remember this part about tornadoes for the test. Watch the Bill Paxton movie. Get a kick out of it. Really recognized how underappreciated Helen Hunt is as an actor. But you really don't have to worry about these things. You don't have to worry about these things because most of the mountain ranges that are in Pennsylvania or geographically occupy the same space as me, they're all very old, they're very ancient, because they're pretty low, they're all rolling and smooth, and everyone knows, unless, of course, you're not a geologist in your spare time, that the oldest and most ancient mountain ranges or mountains in the world are the ones that are not as high, the ones that are smoothed over through long passages of time. On the contrary, the mountains that are the newest or the youngest in the world are the ones that are fucking tall. Examples of this include the Himalayas, Kilimanjaro, and then a third one. So because of the fact we live in a pretty mountainous yet flatted down, pushed down area in Pennsylvania, I never thought tornadoes were something I have to worry about because the odds of it happening or occurring would be so increasingly rare. If a tornado happens here, there has to be something going on. There has to be aliens invading. The government has to be testing some new shit. Instead of off the coast of Jacksonville, they've moved up here. And then fast forward to this past week, I'm sitting at work, not worried about tornadoes because didn't think it was a big deal. I also wasn't worried about quicksand at the time. I look out the window at my job and I notice that there is a colossal thunderstorm happening. I mean, just a big old motherfucking big thunderstorm. Like big old rains and shit. Thunders, lightnings. I made all of those plural. That's funny. Anyway, so I'm just thinking there's a big-ass storm. It's all well and good. It's about time for me to, punch in the old clock and hit the road, Jack. And then I start looking at Twitter, and I'm leaving my job, and I'm looking at my phone, and I see all these videos of places that I recognize. Places like Lowe's. Places like Home Depot. Places like Circuit City. Psych, there are no more Circuit Cities, but that's a damn shame. Anyway, so I see all these places that were affected by an apparent tornado that just happened. Now, I just thought a storm occurred. And literally within that window of time, I look at my phone to Twitter, which is supposed to be the world, and somehow I see at least 2 videos of places that I immediately recognized being ravaged and destroyed by a tornado that just happened. Did I mention before all this happened, my phone went off. I thought a girl named Amber was stolen again, but instead I was supposed to be worried about tornadoes coming. There was a tornado warning in the area where there should not be tornadoes. Why have there been tornadoes? And speaking of the fact that there's been tornadoes that, decimated car dealerships and got your local news out to the far northeast parts of a major city, why aren't there leaves on the ground? And that's not a poetic question. That's not me asking you something profound. That's not a hard-hitting piece of prose. What that is a genuine journalistic question. Why aren't there motherfucking leaves on the ground? Where are the leaves? Where are the leaves? They're the best. Where are the leaves? Is every tree not affected by these hurricanes that I didn't think I have to worry about, yet continue to happen at an increasingly rare, increasingly frequent, and honestly, just another blasé thing now. I think it's so quickly that everyone, at least in Pennsylvania, has completely forgotten the fact that we are not supposed to worry about tornadoes. We're not Oklahoma, God damn it. Spiritually, we might be descended from Oklahoma. I think there's a connection to be made there with Native American tribes and whatnot, but I didn't do enough research to try and piece that together. But what I do know is this is weird. Feels like we got a Bernstein Bears situation going on, because I want to ask everybody I see, like, hey, you don't remember this being normal, right? And now I've tried that on at least 3 people, 2 of which I knew. And 2 of the 3 people were like, well, they were kind of like thrown off at the idea. They were like, I guess, I don't know. The one guy who was like, yeah, totally, man, there are not supposed to be tornadoes. That dude was homeless and a little crazy, and he wasn't vaccinated, so I don't know if anything he had to say was relevant, meaningful, or should be recorded in human history. Let me tell you, something about this tornado occurrence reminds me of a guy that I once knew. Well, I still know. I don't know whether or not he's alive or not. But his name was Mark. Now, Mark was a man from Long Island, classic prison body, mid-50s, all upper body jacked. Anything below the waist looked like a wishbone on a jive turkey's leg. And he was someone who used to come into the gym where I worked. And he would tell us stories of his life, things he did, how he just got out of prison, how he has a live-in nurse, how he has a false identity, why he only uses a flip phone, how he served 15 years because he was stealing traveler's checks out of mailboxes. I don't know what half of that sentence meant. He would also tell us things like, the skies are sprayed, there's aluminum in the clouds, Bill Gates controls the weather, kid. Forget about it. These were all things that he said in that order. He even said forget about it. He was that traditionally like a caricature of a Long Island mob enforcer who had piffy jokes, but only now picture that character as someone completely fascinated and obsessed with and spent all his spare time proselytizing about chemtrails. Now, this was about 3 or 4 years ago when I had this job. I worked at a gym. I sold gym memberships, which is a very easy job because most people who are fat or most people who love gyms are pretty easy to talk out of their money. Yeah, it's a pretty easy task when you put it that way. But this dude claimed to be in witness protection. I found that out within 10 minutes of meeting him, which is probably proof that he wasn't in witness protection. But I remember being fascinated by this dude because he was so entertaining. He would, to complete strangers, start talking about chemtrails and how HARP's doing this and DARPA's doing that. And he would have an acronym for this and for that. And he would just say, the weather's completely manipulated, bro. Skies are sprayed, up is down, I'm a clown. It's all sprayed. Skies are absolutely poisoned today. Look up, it's oblivion. These are things he would say to a bunch of, 20-year-old kids who worked at a job at a gym. And it was funny. It was comical. And then just one day, Mark disappeared. One day, Mark stopped showing up. Gone were the days of him pulling up to the gym, ready to perform for all the employees, getting out of his car, taking a goddamn lawn chair out of his trunk, sitting down and pretending to get tan, all for the sake of one large chemtrail joke. Those days were gone because Mark, much like the aluminum in our clouds, just evaporated. He just disappeared. One day he was gone. And that was something that I thought about for a day, and then, 3 years passed, and I became a completely different person, got involved in a bunch of other different shit, and just stopped thinking about Mark. Something about these tornadoes makes me think about Mark. Was Mark a criminal? Yeah. Was he perhaps onto something with weather manipulation? Yeah. Do I have proof to back any of this up? Hell yeah. Now, before I present this theory, I want to start with pointing something out that I'm sure all of you, if you're on Twitter, you saw over the last week or so. It was a popular tweet in which Dubai released a video because there had been a drought going on. It's really dry. It's really hot. All the typical complaints of the Middle Eastern part of the world. But because Dubai is the only Muslim country that let in an AMC theaters, they have money for some reason. So in a way to combat the oppressive drought and manipulation and control of women in their country, notwithstanding, in order to combat the drought, what they did was artificially create rain, just create a rainstorm all over the entire country of Dubai. And then the video of it on Twitter went by where you saw cars and traffic just whizzing by in Dubai in the middle of a real rainy-ass storm. Think about what the fuck. Stop. Before I continue with anything else, think about what the fuck I just told you. There's a country, Dubai in this case, that had a drought going on, so they said, flip on the make it rain switch, and it did. It did. It fucking did. That's a country controlling the weather in that country. That's what happened. Now, for some reason, because this information was released in the form of a tweet about Dubai early in the work week, all of a sudden, everyone who saw it just doesn't realize the implications of it. And this is not even dot connecting. I'm not drawing any type of line. I'm not offering you any type of perspective other than what the fuck we are all looking at. Dubai was real hot. Dubai said, we'll just make it rain. Dubai records it and shows us. But somehow, there is no way anybody or any country could control the weather. Do you still believe that? Because I'm not even saying I do. I'm not saying the weather is controlled. I'm not saying any of those things because, thankfully, the U.S. Air Force already said them for me not that long ago in 2013. And if you do not believe me, stay tuned. So, in 1993, the U.S. Air Force began construction on a $290 million project that would enable the government's foremost atmospheric researchers to study the ionosphere, the top layer of the Earth's atmosphere. The research center, now run by the University of Alaska Fairbanks, is called the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, or HAARP, which is located in the frozen wilderness of Gackin, Alaska. For a number of reasons, HAARP's activities have drawn the interest of citizens and government officials alike over the past decade. So, what that beautifully read sentence or collection of sentences, i.e. a paragraph, translates to for those of you who are kind of, where I'm at, dumbfounded, the U.S. Air Force literally not that long ago, in 1993, said we need $250 million to go study the atmosphere. And we're going to call it something like HAARP. And the HAARP, we're not talking the instrument, the acronym in this case, stands for High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Frequency waves undetectable by human ears. Things that affect tides in the oceans. Things that affect the way the brain waves react to the environment in which they're in. Things that affect clouds forming. Things that affect the weather. Things that affect barometric pressure. Things that will potentially, at least according to the Air Force, help us determine underground research, underwater research, where potentially structures could be built underneath water or mountains. They already told us they did this. And, the more I did a little digging into HAARP, it was something that I always just heard tossed around with, like, FEMA, which I still to this fucking day don't really know what they do. But it was always just littered with, like, DARPA or DOJ, just these acronyms that, pop up when you're reading anything online that's even kind of conspiratorial about the government or anything at all. They always have their set of acronyms they like to throw around, HAARP being one of them. I never bothered to look into it because kind of the acronym HAARP just sounded a little gay to me, to be honest. So I'm like, I'll get around to it when I get around to it. I got around to it because all of a sudden I'm worried about motherfucking tornadoes in non-tornado country. And then lo and behold, at some point, this stopped being a conspiracy theory and just eventually became accepted news. When the goddamn Air Force said, yep, we're doing that, and we're calling it this. And then enough time went by where everyone either forgot the Air Force said that or just missed it completely, and now you're crazy again if you bring it up. Isn't that wild, the cycle in which not only news works, but the way humans remember shit? Because now, if you mention HAARP, I would think you used to be somebody like Mark. I would think you're somebody who's crazy, probably making up 50% at least of their backstory, and more than likely just has mild schizophrenia. Turns out those things apply to everybody right now over the last year. Because if you thought it was a conspiracy a year ago, at some point in the last 12 months, you were proven probably right. Fauci lied and people died. Skies are sprayed and clouds are full of metal. And for some reason, I still think China's to blame for all of this. And I know I'm throwing out a third of the world's market. I know how many people speak Mandarin, but I'm never going to be one of them. I'm never going to take the time to learn that hieroglyphic bullshit that you call a language. Because it's scary looking. Which is really the same reason I was hesitant to get a vaccine. Because needles are scary looking. I didn't really have a strong stance. Because enough time went by and everyone else was developing one, I was kind of forced into this, situational social box where everyone assumed I was this person who thought the earth was flat and vaccines were bullshit. Turns out only half's that true. The earth ain't flat, though. Wouldn't that be a plot twist? For some reason, I think more people would accept the fact that the earth was flat, let's just say, versus if the government came out and said, hey, by the way, we can control the weather. When that is true, there is no proof whatsoever the earth is flat, other than a few accounts of sailors who lived around the time of Columbus. And most of the story about Columbus that you know of, at least, is a lie. I question anything to do with that man and the stories about him in history. But apart from all that information, apart from Christopher Columbus, I got sidetracked on that. That's something I want to talk about in a later episode. He wasn't the first to America. Grow up. Anyway, back to weather manipulation. It's not just the Air Force, folks. The director of the CIA, John Brennan, I don't know if he's not the current director of the CIA, but he used to be before Comey, the one before that guy. He literally testified before Congress about how the CIA has the ability to ever so slightly increase the barometric temperature pressure and therefore like 1 degree, something super, super not recognizable of just a general place, which could then have a ripple effect that could almost collapse an entire economy if the country's hot enough. That's a CIA director saying, hey, we have the ability to make Burma extra hot in case people don't want to sell us their homes so we could build our black site prisons. And then those who didn't move were burnt by the CIA's weather weapons, and then we could build our black site prisons, which housed terrorists from neighboring countries. I think we can control the weather. And Bill Gates is somebody people love attaching to any type of conspiracy. But Bill Gates is behind this one. God damn it, do I think Bill Gates is behind this one. Because remember like a year or two ago, well, I guess it's 2 years ago now because, the whole coronavirus thing. But like 2 years ago, there was a story where Bill Gates had a genius new idea to shoot clouds of dust, black smut, in a t-shirt style giveaway cannon into the sun, all in the name of preventing climate change. Because of the hole in the ozone, the simplest solution would be to get a bunch of handheld rocket cannons and stuff them up with ash and shoot them up to fill the hole in the ozone. That was a real idea. I know y'all remember it. If you're claiming not to, look inward. So Bill Gates, when he's taking, time away from manipulating every brand of vaccines with the chemical inside of fireflies, it turns out he's actually up to some shit. And it turns out it's an Evel Knievel style plot to control the weather also. That's something I think is happening. Because it's not like he was the CEO and founder of maybe the most important technology company that has had the most amount of government contracts before. It's not like this, computer scientist who's developed a uncanny level of interest and success in the field of, public health and climate change out of nowhere. It's not like that guy has any type of track record for doing those things. And I know it's cheap to say Bill Gates is the bad guy, Bill Gates did this, Bill Gates did that, because I think Bill Gates most of that is just because people, at least in America, were having a hard time either figuring out how to spell George Soros so they could Google him and figure out why he's Satan, or because he just felt too European, so we need a more American villain. Because people think about shit in stories. People use symbols dictate how you see the world. Symbols really make up the ongoing narrative story that's going on in your motherfucking head that keeps the day moving along. And Bill Gates represents a villain, an easy villain. He is a Lex Luthor type. Only he looks way more like a malnourished elderly house cat. And the fact he just got divorced, shout out Melinda Gates. We should start calling Bill Gates Mr. Gates and then Melinda by her first name. Because she got several Billy and she giving it all away. And you know every person in America spent about a week or so just shitting on her, thinking like, every angle for that joke. Turns out she gave away all that money because she said Bill was cheating on him. Bill was spending too much time down at Lil St. James with that guy who looks like, that guy who managed to choke himself to death under the supervision of guards. He's spending too much time hanging out with that boy. He's eating too many chicken sandwiches. He's coming up with ideas to shoot smoke in the air. He's gone off his rocker. I want a divorce. Shout out Melinda Gates. I bet she's not vaccinated. Weather manipulation is a thing. And all these people who present these ideas to you at first in your life that you think are crazy, like these marks that you come across, these people who are the people that explain to you what a chemtrail is, why fluoride. Fluoride sounds like a delicious beverage that doesn't make your dick hard but is hydrating. Why all of these things are these conspiracy theories that you've known to hear about. I think a lot of those people, whether they know it or not, I'm sure not, are being used to spread that in some way. Now, I have absolutely no explanation as to why I think that, but some part of me can't shake the feeling that people like Mark who go around spouting bullshit but seem to keep their lives just together enough to not be homeless, they're propagating or promulgating, whatever that word means, some story or idea or thesis that I think groups of people want out there. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say the government loves a diversion, a red herring, if you will. They love the look over there, now you see it, now you don't. They love the false flag. Let's use a far right term that really gets people going, a false flag. And it's not like the government has no history of, making a public incident look a certain way in the nature of hiding something else or to purposely deceive because this is for the greater good. There is a track record of that. And all of you who are too naive to think the government wouldn't do that, we elect all of the officials that make decisions and they represent us. I say, good, keep thinking that. At the same time, you're stupid. Also, I refer you to, let's just pick Kennedy out of the air here. Operation Northwoods, the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Now, back then, when Kennedy was taking breaks from getting shot up by Dr. Feelgood and banging Marilyn Monroe, he was dealing with communism. What a hero. But he didn't want to go to war. He didn't love war. He was someone who thought war should kind of be avoided unless absolutely necessary. Call him crazy, call him a radical, call him fucking late for dinner because there's been 2 in his dome piece. But something that was an idea to get around the current, liberal sweetheart pussy in office at the time that signed by both Joint Chiefs of Staff was a proposal in which the U.S. government would blow up their own ships, crash their own planes in Cuba near the Bay of Pigs to specifically incite enough public sentiment to then launch a full-on war with Cuba. Because Cuba at the time, and I've always wondered, why anyone in the 50s and 60s and even up to really until Obama said we can go back, why anyone ever gave a fuck about Cuba, why anyone thought this place was big enough, influential enough, or powerful enough to impact fucking anything. The reason for that is because it was one of the only countries within, obviously it's in the Caribbean and stuff, but not in America in this side of the hemisphere where communism was adopted, I'm not going to say it worked because communism never does, always ends in starvation and genocide, but it kind of it stayed around. It lasted a hell of a lot longer than Che Guevara's version did, which was awesome if you were, Russia or China, because you're trying to keep the communism party a-booming because nobody brought snacks because they couldn't afford them. So you got to stay at the party until they bring out free food. So that's music to your ears. You want Cuba to get hella communist, and then you want to eventually infest them too, and then you're one step closer to Florida. And then America, unfortunately, because that's where Florida still is for the time being. So that's what, the military-industrial complex was worried about. Communism spreading and maybe keeping up the threat of communism long enough to keep making money off of war and making and building and selling more guns. Anyway, apart from all that. So something that our own government did, our own representatives of the military, was present a plan in which we blow up and kill our own civilians, damage our own property, all in the name of deceiving everybody to manipulate that deception and steer everybody towards being okay with a war. Now, how does this relate to chemtrails? Well, one, chemtrails are Cuban. Now, it doesn't make literally any sense, even though there is Havana syndrome. More on that later. What a coincidence. Anyway, so is it possible that chemtrails are the current version of Operation Northwoods? They're the current thing that has to be a sleight of hand, false flag, if you will, just to make everyone get thrown off the trail, just so no one thinks or gets warmer to what we're actually doing. So rather than have people start to connect the dots of our weather manipulation potentiality, our technology in which we can control sound frequencies at an extremely low level, rather than let people have access to all of this information in an objective way, which could lead to some conclusions, we're going to instead push this idea that the lines in the sky that you clearly know are from planes, the streaky little pencil dick clouds, are actually evil government chemical clouds. Now, that's stupid. That's stupid for a lot of reasons. On a pragmatic sense, it's stupid because there would be tremendously easier ways to infect an entire world with chemicals or bioweapons. Coronavirus being one of them, potentially. The water supply. Cotton manufacturing. You know how much cotton touches your body every day? There'd be so many easier ways to put chemicals in everybody than shooting them down from, World War I style flyboys, flyover attacks. That's a dumb idea. That would maybe work on 48 farmers in the middle of the country. Maybe it hits some corn, and maybe that does something. But if you really want to poison everybody, everyone knows you put the shit in the toothpaste. Everyone knows these things. You don't drink tap water, you drink bottled water. That's how you avoid the government's evil chemical clouds. Drink smart water. That should be your next slogan. Smart water. You can have that one. That's free. So I think these ideas that sound stupid are these classic hallmark topics that you attach to really, really just far out, uninformed, ignoramus conspiracy people. I think a lot of those things are kind of pushed by the very same agencies working on the shit that is adjacent to that. In this case, HAARP. Now, the High Active Auroral Frequency Research Program, what is that? So these sound frequencies can do a lot of things. They could affect physics, which would therefore affect the weather in a place. But they can also affect the human brain. They can also affect the eardrum. They could go so far as to affecting the human brain that it could affect human behavior, which is something that a lot of people think could be a possible explanation for the recent surge in reported Havana syndrome outbreaks. Now, Havana syndrome is not a new variant. Sorry to disappoint China. Havana syndrome is this complaint that a lot of people who seem to be exclusively in the intelligence community, people who used to be spies, were spies, or strike both of those, will always be spies. All of these people have been reporting, and major outlets have been covering, that they've been suffering from these migraines, these episodes of vertigo, they're completely disbalanced, the nausea, and all of this is stemming from this like low level hum, like this frequency of like a low level, you know, like when the pressure in your ear changes on an airplane, on an airplane. Wow, that was stupid. On an airplane, and the pressure changes, and you kind of hear like a dull ringing in your ear. That sound. All of these people were complaining was causing Havana syndrome, and it was affecting them in all fucking parts of the world. It wasn't just happening for all the people stationed in Havana. It wasn't just happening to all the people stationed back here in America, wherever the CIA is, Langley, or my bedroom, who knows. It wasn't just happening in isolated places. It seemed to be happening triggered by at will, when fucking ever. People would either hear this ringing in their ears that would eventually grow to the point where it was intolerable and they'd be bent over in pain, and the rest of their life was kind of fucked. Forced into early retirement, like you're just not operable. Or a lot of people reported that there would then be somewhere they would see, or they were not sure if it was a memory or not, they'd see swarms of like locusts. I'm not making this shit up. Read it for yourself. They would see a swarm of these bugs or insects all flying somewhere nearby. Both of those things could be true. Both of those things could be made up. But let's say both of those things are true. Let's start with the first one, that low-level drum ringing sound. That's something that it happens to me kind of all the time. And it kind of worries me, or it makes me think I'm being targeted. But every now and then I kind of get the ringing in my ear, but I don't have my tonsils. I might have seasonal allergies. Anytime I get sick, it's something to do with my sinuses. So I just write that shit off to that, because they're not really trying that hard if it's really Havana syndrome. But think about that for a second. If you're fucking with someone's eardrum, the eardrums are like the pressure points that kind of, even ever so slightly, if they come into any type of contact with your brain's neuropathways, could completely alter your person, could make you speak a different language, could make you throw your legs upside down, could make you suck your own dick. It could do anything biologically to your ecosystem, to your computer hardware. Those sounds, that frequency, that low-level noise, that's the thing that could trigger you to do anything. It could be the power of suggestibility. You know, did you ever watch any movie where you hear like some character explaining like, oh, well, this noise is only perceptible to the dog. It's not perceptible to the human ear. We're talking about those fucking things. We're talking about those things being researched by the motherfucking government, by the motherfucking Air Force, by the people whose job it is to research natural phenomena and turn it into a weapon against our enemy. So yeah, be a little concerned when Dubai says, hey, you a little hot? Well, we got to solve for that problem. It involves us flipping the turn on the rain switch and cutting a check to Microsoft and shooting ourselves up full of anti-propaganda communism vaccine. I'm happy to live in a world where I don't have to worry about coronavirus because I'm vaccinated. I commend those who work at pharmaceutical companies and who are just tragically not fairly compensated or appreciated for that work. Thank you to the Purdue family. Thank you to the Paris Climate Accord. Thank you for caring about this planet enough to do something about climate change. I used to think global warming was made up. I've changed my mind. Well, one, because turns out global warming was made up because no one even says that anymore. Now they say climate change. So at least in the grammatical sense, global warming was made up. But I used to think it was made up just because that's who I am. I'm a skeptical person, mostly because it's entertaining and sometimes because I'm actually onto something. But most of the time, it's just fucking fun. I do not think we are in that silly, fun, mildly entertaining, territory right now. I think we just watched Dubai show us the weather weapons, and then we all retweeted it. Man, it's getting weird. It's getting weird out here. It's weird that we have a government research program where the acronym is HARP, and their job is to investigate magical sounds that control the weather in your brain. I still think it's a little weird. Everyone thinks McAfee He killed himself. That did not happen, and that's not related to any of these topics, but I'm not going to stop until I ask enough people what the fuck happened. HAARP controls the weather. Isn't that a surprise? No one saw that one coming. If you would have told me the answer to like climate change and the debate to all that would be like, well, of course climate change is real. We're just the ones controlling it. You would not have had many followers when you first proposed that theory. But it turns out, like most ideas too far ahead of their time or purposely suppressed, and the overlap between both of those occurs quite frequently. An idea like that would not get you many followers. You'd have a hard time starting the church of, the U.S. government controls the weather. What's happening now? Ideology. But lo and behold, you let enough time pass, you're going to be proven right. That seems to be the theme here, because I am not convinced on this whole time is happening linearly thing. Definitely got to be a circle. Definitely got to be a 3D donut shape that just continuously feeds on itself. And for more update on that, some more group of scientists, and I hate starting every segue into a new topic with a team of scientists, but you know that's how news happens. There's teams of scientists and they report on some stuff and then we read about it and we start with the same sentence all the time. But a team of scientists were researching a black hole in probably Switzerland. I don't even remember the country. I'm going to say Switzerland because it always is. So they were studying black holes, and for the first time, a team of scientists was able to actually see the end point, or, the wall that a black hole was up against, so to speak, and record it, to document it, to prove it, which is you can almost think about it in you're seeing a wall of the end of our universe, which is supposedly infinitely expanding until a black hole. And it's obviously not it's a corner and against a wall, because the black hole, it just rests at a fixed point, and everything at the center of the black hole gets sucked in and, shat back out into ancient Mesopotamia probably, or wherever else in time-space. But this team of scientists, by actually confirming what this black hole does, in that there's a fixed point that sucks everything into Mesopotamia, what they did in effect was prove Einstein's theory that time was in fact and is in fact relative. Because if there are these things called black holes that exist that suck in all light, and it gets sent somewhere, probably ripped up, but who knows, even if it's ripped up, where did the pieces that got ripped up go? They still have to exist somewhere in the sandbox of the cosmos. So what that team did was represent that anything going into the black hole has now had a different relationship with time past our traditional monkey brain understanding of the concept. So the fact some shit gets sucked in the hole and goes somewhere is the first time we all thought, well, where does that fit in the timeline? Does it go to the back? Does it go to the middle? Does it restart the halfway through our story and then keep getting sucked back into the black hole? How does this shit work? What are the implications of that? What are the implications of controlling very low-level sounds or hums and vibrations? Well, maybe it can raise the weather. Maybe it can give everybody a migraine or make them a sleeper cell agent. Maybe time, as we know it, is happening differently. Maybe that's why no one can remember the last time we were all fucking worried about tornadoes in Pennsylvania. Maybe we got sucked into some time hole warp black hole loop thing where we're Oklahoma now. I don't think that's the case. I walk outside my door, I don't see cowboy country. I don't see people performing Oklahoma the musical number. I see a bunch of, Northeast Philly dickheads trying to get a hoagie and just go down to the Phil's game. So I don't think I'm in Oklahoma, so I must be in a place that didn't used to get fucked with by tornadoes. But it's happening. Who's to say why? But next time you're testifying before Congress, if you and your team of scientists at whatever research group or program you so choose has the ability to create a tornado, the next time you're asked point blank, hey, can your guys do this? CIA director, you better well be honest about it. Because sooner or later, we're going to figure out how to make it rain too. And then we're going to have another flood.